Rear naked choke. The rear naked choke sits atop the MMA food chain, claiming over 450 UFC victories, more than any other submission in history. Born from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's Mata Leão, literally lion killer, it's the art of turning a fighter's neck into an off switch. Royce Gracie used it to strangle Ken Shamrock into history at UFC 1 back in 1993, proving that technique beats muscles and mullets alike. The setup is simple but brutal. One arm snakes under the chin, the other locks behind the head, sealing off the blood flow in seconds. It doesn't need a gi, gloves, or even much leverage. Just forearm pressure and a bad sense of timing from your opponent. Once locked, the average tap time is under 5 seconds. If you're still fighting it at 6, you're already dreaming about your walkout song. Even Conor McGregor, all swagger and sound bites, met his quiet end in Diaz's arms at UFC 196, only for Khabib to one-up him later with a modified jaw crank that was equal parts choke and dental adjustment. The next submission to earn its place on the highlight reel is the guillotine, where getting caught shooting for a takedown can feel a lot like volunteering for a hangman's audition. Guillotine. The guillotine choke earns its name honestly. It looks exactly like an execution with better lighting. Fighters wrap an arm around the opponent's neck from the front, crank upward, and wait for either a tap or a nap. Marcelo Garcia, the Brazilian grappling prodigy, turned it into an art form in the early 2000s by refining the no-gi grip that every MMA fighter now drills. Cody McKenzie built an entire career and 9 submission wins off his own variant, the McKenzie team, proving you don't need great striking if you've got great strangling. One of the bloodiest examples came at UFC 80 when BJ Penn trapped Joe Stevenson in a guillotine so tight that Stevenson's face looked like a tomato auditioning for a horror movie. The choke remains the perfect punishment for overeager wrestlers shooting lazy double legs, which is why guys like Charles Oliveira bait it with a grin and a sprawl. Most referees stop it before the fighter's body goes limp, but not always. Sometimes the only thing tapping is gravity. Next comes the triangle choke, where the legs take over and the arms become spectators. Triangle choke. The triangle choke turns your own legs into a sleeper hold and your opponent's ego into a cautionary tale. Born in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and perfected from guard, it shuts off both carotid arteries using the thighs and a trapped arm. Basically a blood choke disguised as yoga gone wrong. Royce Gracie used it at UFC 4 to submit 260-pound wrestler Dan Severn, proving once again that leverage beats lunch size. 16 years later, Anderson Silva pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in MMA history, catching Chael Sonnen in a triangle at UFC 117 after losing 4 straight rounds. Fighters like Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson love it because it rewards flexibility, spite, and the ability to smile while upside down. Defending it means posturing up, framing the shoulder, and pretending you're not already seeing stars. By the time the legs snap shut, fans know the fight's already over. They're just waiting for the ref to catch up. The next evolution of limb entrapment is the arm triangle, where fighters trade leg pressure for shoulder suffocation. Arm triangle. The arm triangle is that rare move where your opponent uses your own shoulder to choke you out, like getting bullied by your own anatomy. It's a side choke that turns one arm into a pillow and the other into a blood blockade. In judo, it's called katagatame, which sounds gentle until you realize it's basically a sleeper hold wrapped in politeness. Cain Velasquez gave a clinic at UFC 146 when he folded Bigfoot Silva like laundry, calmly adjusting the grip until Silva went from heavyweight monster to bedtime story. Glover Teixeira made it his go-to weapon, finishing so many guys with it that commentators started calling it the Glover hug. The trick is locking your own bicep across the neck, tight enough to stop blood flow, but just loose enough to look like you're whispering a secret. Most defenses in the same way. The moment your arm drops too low, you've essentially volunteered for a nap. Next comes the Darce choke, like the arm triangle's cooler, sneakier cousin, who doesn't wait for permission to ruin your breathing. Darce choke. The Darce choke is what happens when the arm triangle decides to stand up, drink an energy drink, and start choking people from the front instead. Named after Joe Darce, A guy who did it so often they basically said, "Fine, it's yours now." This move attacks from a front headlock and makes wrestlers instantly regret shooting double legs. The setup looks simple. Thread one arm under the neck, grab your opposite bicep, and roll forward like you're trying to squeeze the Wi-Fi signal out of your opponent. Tony Ferguson hit it perfectly on Edson Barboza at the tough finale in 2015, mid-scramble, while throwing elbows for extra flavor because Tony can't just do a choke. He has to do performance art. Brendan Schaub got folded by Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira at UFC 134 in Brazil, where the crowd celebrated like someone just ended a soap opera cliffhanger. The DARS works best when the other guy's panicking and you're calm enough to look bored while he fades out. It's fast, sneaky, and oddly polite, like saying, "Shh, shh, stop fighting this." Next up is the Anaconda choke. The DARS twisted sibling who rolls the other way, and somehow looks even more like a death cuddle. Anaconda choke. The Anaconda choke is basically the DARS clingy twin. The same family just rolls the other way and holds on a little too long. It starts from a sprawl when a desperate wrestler shoots in, gets stuffed, and suddenly realizes they volunteered to audition for Planet Earth. Predator Edition. Fabricio Verdum pulled it off beautifully against Alexander Emelianenko in 2006, wrapping him up like a Christmas gift no one wanted and rolling him straight into nap time. The setup is simple. Trap an arm, thread under the neck, and roll your opponent until the only thing moving is their regret. It's an air choke that shuts down both breathing and dignity, which is why lanky guys like Tony Ferguson love it. Nothing says flexibility like turning someone purple from half a mile away. The tap comes fast, and when it doesn't, consciousness leaves the chat in under 10 seconds. You don't see it often in modern UFC, mostly because it takes balance, timing, and the confidence to roll on top of a flailing human. Three things that not every fighter has on a Tuesday night. The next choke, the Peruvian necktie, cranks things up a notch. It's the only submission that looks like yoga if yoga also caused brain fog. Peruvian necktie. The Peruvian necktie sounds like something you'd wear to a wedding in Lima, but in MMA it's a front row ticket to regret. Invented by Tony D'Souza, the Peruvian pioneer who apparently looked at the guillotine choke and thought, what if I just threw my legs in there for style points? This submission is equal parts creativity and chaos. CB Dalloway pulled it off at UFC 119 against Joe Dirksen, draping his legs over the guy's back like he was trying to ride a backpack into submission. It combines the front choke of a guillotine with the spine-twisting misery of a neck crank, creating a move so uncomfortable that even chiropractors wince watching it. The fighter has to sprawl heavy, chest overhead, and commit fully, because if you miss, congratulations, you just handed your opponent top position and maybe your dignity. It's rare, flashy, and utterly brutal, which is why it's known in gyms as the show-off choke, the one you hit only if people are filming. Up next is the Kimura lock, where fighters stop choking you and just start stealing your shoulder instead. Kimura. The Kimura is that move where your opponent stops choking you and just decides to repossess your shoulder. Named after Masahiko Kimura, the man who literally snapped Helio Gracie's arm in 1951, it's a submission with a 70-year track record of making orthopedic surgeons very rich. It's a double wrist lock that attacks the shoulder joint by twisting the arm behind the back, which sounds fine until you realize shoulders weren't designed to face west while your chest faces east. Frank Mir gave us the most infamous version at UFC 140 when he cranked Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira's arm so hard the pop echoed louder than the crowd. Some fans still swear they heard it from the parking lot. It's versatile too. Works from guard, side control, or even standing if you're mean enough to try it. Catch wrestlers call it a key lock, probably because it unlocks pain in ways your insurance won't cover. Used correctly, it's both a submission and a sweep. Used badly, it's an apology waiting to happen. Next comes the Americana, the Kimura's happier, more patriotic cousin that bends the arm the other way, but ruins your day just the same. Americana. The Americana is the Kimura's overly patriotic cousin, the one that bends your arm the other way while shouting freedom. It's a basic jiu-jitsu submission every white belt learns, mostly because it's the easiest way to make someone question their life choices without actually breaking anything. Well, usually. Technique is optional. Just pin, grunt, and pray the referee saves your opponent's joints. The setup is classic. Isolate the arm, slap the wrist to the mat, and crank the elbow skyward until your opponent starts making Wi-Fi connection noises. It's easier to defend than a kimura, but only if you enjoy the sensation of your shoulder trying to migrate south. Refs jump in fast because one wrong twitch and someone's rotator cuff is filing for early retirement. It's old school, effective, and just dignified enough to make you look like you know jujitsu while you're really just painting the canvas with your opponent's arm. Next up, the arm bar, where the goal is simple, the limb is straight, and the screams echo beautifully. Arm bar. The arm bar is jujitsu's version of customer service. If you don't respond fast enough, something's definitely getting broken. It's a straight joint lock that hyperextends the elbow against your hips. Simple, elegant, and horrifyingly effective. Ronda Rousey built an empire on it, winning 11 of her first 12 fights by turning arms into modern art. Royce Gracie showed it off way back at UFC 2 against Jason DeLucia, proving that even in 1993, people were still learning the hard way not to leave their limbs unattended. The technique's easy to describe, but brutal in practice. Trap the arm, swing your leg over the head, squeeze your knees, and wait for either a tap or a sound you can't unhear. Defenders try to stack, clasp hands, or whisper apologies to their elbows. But once it's straightened, physics takes over and regret sets in. Veterans like Fedor use the hitchhiker escape, which involves rolling out like you're late for a flight, and if you don't, you're about to be. Next comes the omoplata, where jiu-jitsu gets fancy, and fighters start attacking shoulders using their legs like confused contortionists. Omoplata. The omoplata is the submission that says, I could choke you, but I'd rather use my legs like an octopus with a grudge. It's a shoulder lock applied entirely with your lower body, flashy, complicated, and about as rare in MMA as a fair judge's scorecard. Fighters usually set it up from guard, swinging a leg over the shoulder and rotating the hips until the victim starts making noises, usually reserved for dental visits. Most of the time, it's used as a sweep instead of a finish, since opponents can roll or stack out, essentially saying, nice try, Cirque du Soleil. Charles Oliveira tried it several times early in his UFC career, because of course he did. He's basically BJJ's version of a magician, pulling new limbs out of hats. The torque on the shoulder is insane, but it's so hard to pull off consistently that it's more of a flex than a finish. Goga Plata. The Goga Plata is what happens when jiu-jitsu meets yoga and decides to get violent about it. It uses the shin bone, yes, the shin bone, to choke your opponent across the throat, which sounds less like a technique and more like something you'd see in a street fight filmed on a flip phone. Nick Diaz pulled it off against Takanori Gomi at Pride 33, a fight so wild it got banned for basically everything except breathing, which Gomi couldn't do anyway. The move requires extreme flexibility and a rubber guard setup, meaning you have to fold yourself in half like a lawn chair before folding the other guy in half emotionally. It's not a blood choke, it's an air choke. So it's pure suffocation with a dash of panic. Essentially, you're telling your opponent, breathe through your regrets. Diaz's win got overturned because of a positive cannabis test, which somehow made the whole thing even more Nick Diaz. Anderson Silva tried the same move at UFC 67, got close, and still made it look like art class for psychopaths. You rarely see it now, but every time someone even attempts it, the crowd loses its mind. Because watching someone choke another human being with their own leg is just good family entertainment. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.